listening to Dark Trail Confessions, where the woods hide secrets and the darkness often has eyes. People think skinwalkers live far away, deep in the desert, somewhere you'll never go. That's the lie that keeps them safe. Because the stories you're about to hear didn't happen miles from civilization. They happened at bedroom windows, on back porches, in driveways, and just outside doors that should have kept their owners safe. You're listening to Dark Trail Confessions. And these are 4 skinwalker encounters that followed people home. Story 1. It knocked like my brother. I grew up on the reservation, and from the time I was old enough to understand language, I was taught there were things you didn't invite into your life by speaking them aloud. Some stories weren't meant to be shared, some names weren't meant to be said, and some sounds, especially at night, were never meant to be answered. My grandmother used to tell me, if something calls you after dark and it sounds familiar, that's when you should be afraid. I didn't understand what she meant until years later, when I moved back home to help care for her after my grandfather passed. The house sits alone at the edge of scrubland. Far enough from the nearest neighbor that night, sounds carry in strange ways. Wind, coyotes, footsteps that echo longer than they should. At first, nothing felt wrong, and the first week passed quietly. I fell back into old routines, locking the doors at sunset, closing the curtains, keeping lights low. It felt comforting, like muscle memory. The first night I heard it, I thought I was dreaming. A soft knock came from the side of the house, 3 taps. Not urgent, not loud, just deliberate. I sat up in bed listening, then I heard my brother's voice. "Hey," it said softly, "you awake?" My brother lived hours away. He hadn't been home in months. I knew that. But the voice didn't sound off. It sounded exactly like him. Same cadence, same slight rasp he gets when he's tired. I almost answered. That's what scared me the most afterward. How natural it felt to respond. Instead, I stayed quiet. The knock came again, this time closer, under my bedroom window. "Come on," the voice said. "I know you're in there." My window is set high, nearly 6 feet off the ground. The voice was level with me. I didn't move. A long pause followed. Then the voice sighed, like someone disappointed. "Okay," it said, "I'll wait." I lay there until morning, heart hammering, telling myself it had been exhaustion, memory, stress. I told no one. The second night, it came earlier. I was still awake when I heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy, uncertain, like something learning how to walk on uneven ground. It stopped beneath my window. This time it didn't knock. It whispered my name. Not shouted, not called. Whispered its exuberant and close enough that I imagined breath against the glass. Open the window. My stomach turned cold. I slid out of bed and lay flat on the floor, pressing myself against the wall. I remembered my grandmother's words and kept my mouth shut, even as panic made my chest burn. The whisper changed. It tried my mother's voice next, then my aunt's, then my own. It repeated the same sentence over and over, changing tone, changing pitch, like it was cycling through options, trying to find the one that would work. At some point, it laughed. It wasn't a human laugh. It was too measured, like something imitating a sound it didn't understand. By the time morning came, I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. My grandmother took one look at me and said nothing. She just burned cedar and told me to stay inside that night. The third night was worse. It didn't come to the window, it came to the door. I heard it testing the handle slowly, patiently, like it had all the time in the world. "Let me in," it said, using my brother's voice again, but something was wrong now. The voice was flatter. The pauses were slightly too long. It had learned the sound but not the emotion. I backed away until my spine hit the wall, watching the handle twitch as it turned back and forth. "Cold out here," it said. "You wouldn't leave me outside, would you?" Then it knocked, once, hard enough to rattle the frame. I don't remember how long it stayed. I remember the scratches on the wood the next morning. Deep, uneven, like fingers that bent where they shouldn't. After that, it stopped pretending. It didn't hide anymore. Some nights I would see it standing at the edge of the property, just beyond the light, tall and thin, head tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Other nights, it would circle the house, slow and deliberate, dragging something heavy behind it. I never saw what it was dragging. It learned my routines. It knew when I turned off the lights. It knew which window I slept near. It knew when I was awake. One night I made the mistake of looking, just a crack through the curtain. I saw its eyes reflecting light that wasn't there, too high off the ground, too still. It smiled when it realized I could see it. After that, it started knocking every night. Not always the same place. Not always the same voice. Sometimes it would knock and say nothing, just waiting. Sometimes it would knock from multiple sides of the house, moving faster than anything should. My grandmother passed a month later. I left the house the next day. I didn't pack much. I didn't say goodbye. The house still stands empty. Story 2. It followed me home. Before I ever saw it, I didn't realize I was being followed at first. That's the part that still bothers me the most. Not that something stalked me, but that it had time to watch me without me ever knowing it was there. I worked late shifts at a warehouse just outside town. Nothing unusual. Same route home every night. Same empty stretch of road through forest before the last turn into my neighborhood. Routine makes you blind. The first sign came in the form of something small, my porch light. I distinctly remember turning it off before leaving for work one night. I always did. Habit drilled into me by my father. But when I pulled into my driveway hours later, it was already on, cast in a pale yellow circle over the front steps. I stood there in my car longer than I should have, engine idling, staring at the house. Nothing else looked wrong. No broken windows. No open doors. I told myself I'd forgotten. That happens. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it. That should have been the end of it. The next night, the porch light was on again. I knew I'd turned it off that time. I even remembered the click of the switch under my thumb. Still, I shrugged it off. Old wiring. Electrical quirks. Anything but the thought that someone or something had been there. A few nights later, I noticed footprints near the side of the house. The ground was soft from rain. The prints weren't clear enough to identify, but they were wrong in a way that's hard to explain. Too long. Toes uneven, like the foot hadn't decided what shape it was supposed to be. They led toward the tree line. I didn't follow them. From then on, things escalated slowly, deliberately, like whatever was watching me didn't want to rush. I began to feel it on the drive home. That sensation you get when you're not alone, even though there's no one in the passenger seat. Once I glanced in the rearview mirror and thought I saw something tall standing just beyond the reach of my headlights, far back on the road. When I blinked, it was gone. The first time I heard my name, I was still in the car. I'd just pulled into the driveway when it came from the woods behind the house. Hey. Soft. Familiar. It sounded like my voice. I laughed out loud and nervous, embarrassed, and locked the doors before getting out. That night, I dreamed of footsteps circling the house. On the 5th night, I woke up to knocking. Not banging, not frantic, measured. 3 knocks on the front door, a pause, 3 more. I lay there listening, heart pounding, waiting for whoever it was to say something. They didn't. When I finally worked up the nerve to check, the porch was empty. The door cam showed nothing. No movement, no heat signature, just the door. The following night, the knocking moved. It came from the side of the house, directly beneath my bedroom window. That's when the voice changed. "Let me in," it said. It was my voice again. Same pitch. Same tired cadence. I didn't answer. I didn't move. The voice tried again, this time warmer, friendlier. "You forgot something. Just open the door." The handle rattled once. I don't remember falling asleep. In the days that followed, it began appearing before I got home. Once I saw it standing at the edge of my driveway when I turned the corner. Tall, pale, motionless. By the time I slammed the brakes, it had stepped backward into the trees, moving with an awkward smoothness that made my stomach drop. It started leaving things behind. A cigarette butt on the porch. I don't smoke. Mud on the inside doorknob. A handprint on the bathroom mirror that wasn't mine. Too long, too narrow, fingers bent inward slightly like they'd been pressed flat unnaturally. The worst part wasn't the fear, it was the realization that it was learning me. It knew when I came home. It knew when I showered. It knew which lights I left on. One night I heard footsteps in the hallway while I was in bed. Slow. Careful. I held my breath as they stopped outside my bedroom door, and the knob turned. Just a fraction. Enough to let me know it could open it if it wanted to. Instead, it spoke. "Still awake?" it asked, in my voice. I left the next morning, packed whatever I could fit in the car, and drove until I didn't recognize the roads anymore. For 3 nights, I slept in motels. On the 4th night, the clerk handed me my key and said, "Your friend is already waiting." I asked what she meant. She pointed toward the parking lot. Someone tall stood beside my car, watching the entrance, smiling. I don't sleep indoors anymore. Sometimes when I'm alone at night, I hear my own voice calling my name from just outside whatever shelter I've found. And every time it already knows where I am. Story 3. I hunted my whole life. Then something hunted me. I've been hunting since I was 12 years old. Deer, elk, coyotes, you name it. I know what animals sound like when they're hurt, when they're angry, and when they're curious. I know the difference between fear and aggression. I know when you're being watched. That's why it took me so long to accept what was happening. Because whatever came after me in those woods wasn't acting like an animal. I was deep into a solo hunt. Several miles from the nearest road, I'd camped in that forest dozens of times before. Familiar terrain, familiar silence. The kind of place that feels empty in a comforting way. The first day went smoothly. I tracked sign, marked trails, settled in for the night just before dark. That's when I heard footsteps, Not random movement, not brush breaking, footsteps that stopped when I stopped moving. I froze, listening. Nothing. I told myself it was another hunter. Maybe someone else pushing deeper than expected. It happens. Still, I made sure the fire stayed low that night. Sometime after midnight, I woke to breathing slow, controlled, too close. I reached for my rifle and held it tight against my chest, listening. The breathing moved, circling the edge of my camp, never stepping into the firelight. I could hear its weight shift, leaves compressing underfoot. Then it spoke. Hey. One word. Calm. Familiar. It sounded like my brother. I nearly answered before my brain caught up. My brother had died 3 years earlier. The voice repeated itself, closer this time. You okay? I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I kept my eyes on the darkness beyond the firelight, waiting to see a shape. What I saw instead was movement, tall, thin, stepping just far enough forward that the light almost touched it, and then retreating again. It wanted me to look. By morning, the camp was untouched. No tracks I could recognize. I should have left then. Instead, I pushed deeper into the forest. That was my mistake. The second night, it didn't circle, it followed. I heard it behind me as I hiked. Not constantly, but enough that I couldn't convince myself it was coincidence. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it resumed. I turned suddenly at one point, rifle raised. Nothing, but I smelled it then. A sour, coppery smell like old blood and wet fur. That night I set no fire. I didn't want to be seen. The sound started anyway, branches snapping deliberately, footsteps pacing, something heavy dragging along the ground. Then the mimicry began. It started copying my movements. I shifted in my sleeping bag. It shifted outside. I cleared my throat, and it did the same. I chambered around. A hollow click echoed back from the darkness. That's when I whispered, "What are you?" It answered immediately. Skinwalker. The word came out wrong, like it didn't fit in the mouth saying it. The next thing I saw was its face. It stepped into the faint moonlight, just enough. Tall, wrongly proportioned. Its limbs bent slightly inward, joints angling in ways that made my stomach turn. Its face looked like someone had tried to stretch human features over something that didn't belong. Its eyes reflected light like an animal's. It smiled like a person. I fired. I know I hit it. I know I did. It staggered back, then straightened, tilting its head like it was curious, and then it laughed. I ran. I don't remember how long I ran. I remember branches tearing at my skin, my lungs burning. The sound of its footsteps keeping pace without effort. It wasn't chasing, it was herding. When I finally broke into a clearing, I collapsed, sobbing, certain I was about to die. Nothing came, no footsteps, no breathing, just silence. At dawn, I found my way back to the trailhead. My truck was waiting. So was something else. Handprints covered the hood. Long fingers pressed flat into the dust, as if someone had leaned over it, waiting. I don't hunt anymore. Sometimes at night I hear movement just beyond the tree line near my house. Sometimes it sounds like footsteps. Sometimes it sounds like me. Story 4. I was followed by something I can't name. I was told not to write this down. Not officially, anyway. The incident report I submitted was 3 pages long, heavily redacted, and signed off by 2 supervisors who never once asked me to explain it in person. They just told me to take a few weeks off, reassigned my patrol area, and reminded me that anything I experienced beyond that report was stress-related misperception. This document is not that report. This is the version I never submitted, the one I've kept hidden for almost 6 years. And if this ends up being the last thing I ever write, then you'll understand why. I was a backcountry ranger stationed near a protected forest zone that borders tribal land. I won't name the forest, not because I don't want to, but because I was explicitly warned that mentioning it again would result in termination or worse. The call came in just after dusk. A hunter hadn't checked in. Male, mid-40s, experienced, familiar with the terrain. His truck was found at a trailhead that hadn't seen much foot traffic in years. No sign of struggle, no blood, no gear missing, just his boots, placed neatly side by side at the edge of the trees. That alone should have told us something was wrong. Hunters don't remove their boots in the wilderness, not unless they're dead, delirious, or told to. The search team was small. Myself, another ranger named Cole, 2 volunteers, and a tribal liaison who joined us quietly without much introduction. He didn't wear a uniform, didn't carry a radio. He barely spoke. But when he did, we listened. The first night was uneventful in the way that silence can be worse than noise. No animal calls, no insects. Even the wind felt muted, like the forest was holding its breath. At around 11 p.m., we heard someone calling out, "Help! I'm over here!" It was close. Too close. Cole immediately reached for his radio, but the liaison stopped him with a hand on his wrist. "That's not him," the man said calmly. "How do you know?" Cole asked. The liaison tilted his head, listening. "Because he's been dead for 2 days." The voice called again. Same words, same tone, same desperation. "Help, I'm over here." It sounded perfect. We didn't answer. That was the first rule the liaison gave us. Never answer, never call back, never say a name. And above all, never follow a voice that knows you. The second night was worse. We found tracks, bare footprints leading deeper into restricted land. They were wrong in subtle ways, too long, toes that dragged unnaturally, heels that pressed too deep, like the thing walking didn't quite understand balance. At one point, the footprints stopped abruptly. No scuffing, no turn, just gone. That's when the radio crackled. "Ranger Unit, do you copy?" It was my voice, perfectly, exactly. I felt the blood drain from my face. Cole stared at me. "You didn't." "I didn't," I said. The radio repeated it. "Ranger Unit, do you copy?" Then softer. "You left me out here." The liaison closed his eyes. "It knows you now," he said. We camped in a clearing we shouldn't have. The liaison warned us, but command insisted we hold position until morning. Procedure over instinct. At around 2:17 a.m., something walked the perimeter of our camp. Heavy steps, slow, deliberate. Too heavy to be a man, too measured to be an animal. It circled us once, twice. On the third pass, it stopped just beyond the firelight and spoke, not shouted, not growled, spoke. "Why won't you help me?" It was the hunter's voice. I'd listened to his voicemail before the search, same cadence, same slight stutter on certain words. Cole whispered, "Jesus Christ." The thing laughed, but it laughed wrong, like it was copying the idea of laughter without understanding joy. At some point, I realized something else. The footsteps didn't match the voice's position. It was speaking from the trees. But the steps, they were behind me, right behind my tent, breathing, learning. The liaison stood up. I grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" He looked at me with something close to pity. "Ending it," he said. He stepped past the firelight and spoke in a language I didn't recognize. His voice was firm, commanding. The forest answered, branches cracked. Something moved fast, too fast, and there was a sound I still hear in my sleep. A wet, tearing scream. Then silence. The liaison never came back. Morning came like nothing had happened. No tracks, no signs of struggle, no body. Command called off the search by noon. Officially, the hunter was listed as missing, presumed dead. Unofficially, that area was quietly reclassified. Trails removed from maps, access points blocked. I asked one of my superiors what happened to the liaison. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "There was no liaison on your team." I tried to forget. Transferred posts, took leave, told myself it was trauma. I tried to forget. Transferred posts, took leave, told myself it was trauma. Until 3 months later when I heard my voice again, coming from the tree line outside my cabin. Soft, patient. "Ranger unit," it said. "I'm over here." I don't answer anymore. I don't sleep near windows. And if this is the last thing you hear from me, then understand this. It doesn't stay in the forest. It learns you. And once it knows your voice, it never forgets. Some things don't hunt in the open. They follow routines. They learn voices. They wait for you to believe you're safe again. If you've experienced something you still can't explain, something that followed you home, something that knew your name, you can share it with us at darktrailconfessions@gmail.com. And if this was the last story you hear tonight, don't answer the knocking.